Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's Bloom Impact Investing webinar on the topic of investing to support women. My name is Camille. I am the founder of Bloom Impact Investing, and I will be your host today. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people, the traditional owners of the land on which this meeting is taking place today, which for me is Brisbane, Meerjin. I recognize the country north and south of the Brisbane River as the home of both the Turrbal and Jaguaran nations. I pay deep respects to the elders, past, present, and future. Welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to see you all. For our new members today, please allow me to introduce Bloom and our Impact Investing Meetup group. At Bloom, we are focusing on the impact money can have in the fight against climate change. We are on a mission to make impact investing easy and accessible. And part of this mission is to offer educational opportunities like these webinars today to propel the voices of impact investing and sustainable finance experts far and wide. Since early this year, we have hosted many events, all touching on one or several sustainable development goals. Our previous webinars are all available on our YouTube channel. Simply search Bloom Impact Investing on YouTube and you should find our previous event recordings. The aim of our webinars is to bring a community of impact investors and agents of change, so you today, so that we can build a greener, more circular and inclusive economy. This event today is supported by the Impact Group. Impact Queensland is a not-for-profit convening power for later stage social entrepreneurship and for-purpose capital. Impact Queensland exists to improve positive social and environmental outcomes in the new economy. The team at Impact Queensland provides advisory services, resources, education, and networks to facilitate deal flow and the growth of the impact economy across the state. Thank you so much for your support today. Quick housekeeping. Please note this event is being recorded. The webinar will be made available to the attendees after the event via an email. And please also note that the information provided in this webinar will be general in nature only and does not constitute personal financial advice. Before acting on any information from this presentation today, you should consider how appropriate this information is in regard to your objectives, financial situations, and needs. Also, please note, this is a safe space. It is a friendly group, so you can ask any question throughout the event by typing in the chat. We will keep 15 minutes at the end for Q&As. Now, enough about formalities. Let me introduce you to the webinar topic and our speaker. Today, we are diving into a topic that I'm personally deeply passionate about: investing to support women and diversity. And if we are still talking about this in 2020, it means that yes, there is still a gap. Many gaps, in fact. A gender pay gap, workforce participation gap, funding gap, retirement gap. Where do we even begin? Both women and the economy are missing out. According to the Grattan Institute, the Australian economy alone could grow by about 25 billion if we supported more women into the workforce and empowered them to achieve their full economic potential. So today, we will deep dive into one powerful way to address this gender imbalance: investing to support women. And while the Australian startup ecosystem continues to grow, businesses funded by women are still underrepresented, with fewer female-led businesses starting, scaling, and securing finance. The mix of barriers for women are complex, but despite the frustrating state of play, what are the ways we can work to change this picture? The Wade Institute revealed that of venture capital early stage funding of companies in Australia, around 29.4% have at least one female founder, compared to 70.6% of male-only founders. So there's still a lot of work to do. Why is such a gap? How can we empower female entrepreneurs and improve diversity through angel and impact investing? What financial evidence do we have that women-led businesses are worth investing in? To answer these questions, I have the pleasure to invite one of the most highly regarded expert and investor on the question, Ariane Barker from Scale Investors. A quick word about Scale Investors, and then I will hand it over to Ariane. Scale Investors is a female-focused member-based angel investor network who invest in exceptional female founders. Founded by a small group of visionary women in Melbourne in 2013, Scale Investors is bringing the female founder investment gap for angel investing and venture capital by empowering sophisticated high net worth investors to invest in and support talented and diverse teams in early stage businesses. Now, a quick word about a fantastic speaker, Ariane. Ariane is the CEO of Scale Investors. And sorry, Ariane, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I've got a strong French accent, so please.
I was about to say, so I'm half French, so thank you for saying my name properly, Ariane.
Ariane, okay, wonderful. So Ariane is the CEO of Scale Investors. Prior to leading Scale Investors, she had 20 years experience working in blue chip financial services companies in senior executive management roles, including GB Ware at National Australian Bank in Melbourne, also in capital market roles with HSBC, Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch in Hong Kong, Tokyo, New York, and London. You have traveled, Ariane. With a background in international investment banking across a range of asset classes, particularly alternatives, Ariane brings a diversity of insights and perspectives to strategic decision-making. Ariane was awarded an AICD Board Diversity Scholarship in 2011 and has keen interest in education, healthcare, and the arts. Thus, her roles in not-for-profit including the Murdoch Children Research Institute, the Royal Eye and Ear Hospital, and the National Gallery of Victoria Women's Association. Ariane, welcome. It is an honor to have you with us today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Camille, and thank you to everyone for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited because I think this is the first time I've spoken to a group in Queensland, and we are going national, and we're getting some great feedback. So it's very exciting to meet everyone. And please, by all means, use this as an interactive discussion. I'm very happy to take lots of questions through the chat. I will be sharing my screen, so I might not be able to see the chat. So Camille, if you can interrupt me if there's a question and I can pause to answer, I'm happy to do that. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully this works. So I'm going to go into here, and how's that look?
Yes, we can see your screen. All good.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to give a bit of color and trying to really amplify the impact piece, given the wonderful organization that is Bloom. Scale Investors has been going for 7 years, which is amazing because I remember when we were announced, I was working at JB Weir and I saw an article in the AFR, which talks about the launch of Scale in 2013 and the purpose around activating more capital for female founders. So there's a couple of reasons why I was super excited about hearing about Scale, which I had never heard of before that article. One was I'm a migrant, so my mother's French and my father grew up in the Middle East and became a naturalized US citizen. And we were, I was born in the US, but I have a strong French culture. And then I met my Australian husband and I moved through those various roles. I started my career in New York, but I ended up in Melbourne about 10 years ago. And when I got to Melbourne in my late 30s, I thought to myself, wow, financial services here is very different to any other market that I've worked in before, and particularly quite different for women. You know, I'd been promoted as an executive director at Goldman Sachs. I'd worked in alternative assets in Asia. And I got to Melbourne and I was really surprised by the way that my skills were received by the market here. The good news is that I am very pleased with the board roles that I've been involved with. My eldest daughter has a disability, and that speaks to my roles in the healthcare sector. And Australia is amazing when it comes to supporting people through our healthcare system and our disability sector. So I'm very passionate about what is happening in Australia. But I saw a bit of a disconnect between the female side of the population and the male side of the population, particularly in financial services, which was my career. So when I saw Scale being launched, I was really happy with the thematic about activating capital for women-led businesses. I thought that the alternative asset class, i.e. venture capital, private equity, and startups, was a very important sector to be investing in. And again, in Australia, I didn't see that much activity happening. So the fact that there was this amazing group emerging with a focus on female entrepreneurs combined with a focus on activating capital in startups really got me quite engaged and excited. So I set out and met my predecessor, the inaugural CEO of Scale. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our thematic, but happy to take any questions on my journey and how that feeds into this thematic. I hope I've provided some color there. So our thesis is that we really want to close the entrepreneurial gender gap in Australia. That is a global gender gap that we've seen proven through a number of statistical studies, through research reports run by Boston Consulting Group, run by Harvard Business School. If you go to our website, scaleinvestors.com.au, you can get a lot of research and underlying content which will support the statistics and the report and the reporting that I'll be talking to in this presentation as to why this gender gap exists, not only globally, but it's even more acute in Australia. And fortunately or unfortunately, we don't actually know the true impact in Australia because nobody's reporting in Australia around the actual number of startups led by women that are getting funding versus the overall number of startups that are getting funding. And we all know that the ecosystem has been growing rapidly. So we might be better than these statistics at a global level, but my sense is that we're still highly challenged just from my personal experience. So Scale has managed to do an amazing job in providing real access to capital for real companies that are commercial companies that are highly viable startups that have been founded by women or co-founded by women, because I personally am very passionate about diversity. Having lived and worked all around the world, I've personally experienced what it feels like to be a minority in not only as a woman in financial services, but also as a Caucasian woman working on the trading floor in Hong Kong. So we have to be very empathetic, and Australia has its own culture. And again, our culture is changing. So we have a lot to do, a lot of work on the diversity side, but Scale's main thematic is to close the entrepreneurial gender gap because it's such a wide gap. And we also see such huge opportunity. And I like to talk about this as an arbitrage opportunity, because wherever there are opportunities in markets where there is something that's been underfunded but cannot perform, that's a clear arbitrage. And that's my background. So that's how I personally look at it. But from a Scale perspective, this is our thematic. We need to help support women to participate and succeed in capital markets. And that happens both on the entrepreneurial side, but it also happens on the investor side, because in our asset class of angel investing, because Scale is an angel investing network, angel investors typically invest very, very early in seed stage deals in startup companies. And some of the statistics are really compelling here. So it's been shown that women-led startups generate 10% more revenue than male-led company, than 100% male-led companies, and those companies deliver a 35% higher return. Women tend to be even more efficient with running businesses, i.e. With the capital that they raise. And the statistics again show that 2/3 of funds led by women tend to be more effective with running their businesses and with being efficient with capital relative to their entirely male counterparts. Now, this is more the contrast and compare between all female-led companies and versus all male-led companies. You can imagine that when there's a female co-founder who has an equal share in the business, some of those statistics are even better. And again, it's been proven that startups with female founders are more likely to achieve higher valuations. And that's a function of some of those metrics that I just touched on. So our thesis is really to back female founders. Our network is comprised of a majority of female investors, but we are very inclusive on the investor side because we want to activate as much capital for our thematic as possible. Here are some other components of our thesis, including we activate at the seed stage. So we invest in world-class female-led startups at seed and early stage. So we often meet startups super early. I personally get involved in a whole suite of incubators and accelerators, increasingly across the country, who again are trying to help solve this entrepreneurial gender gap problem. As a function of that, we get to meet amazing female founders all the time. And many times they're asking the same questions around how do they access capital? What is a venture capital investment? What is an angel investment? And we've developed through that whole engagement a really strong pillar around educating the founders as well as the investors, because I don't know about you, but for me, angel investing was a relatively new concept when I heard about scale relative to what I know about private equity and venture capital. So again, there's lots of jargon, and we want to help demystify everything for founders, whether they be male or female. We want all founders to feel very comfortable having conversations with investors. So that's definitely something that Scale's been focusing on as well, particular to the female founders. And in that, we might get into more of a discussion around things like imposter syndrome, the way that women sell their ideas and their businesses, as well as a lot of the jargon that exists in financial services. Some of the other points here, which are important to know, is that the women-led businesses have a proven competitive advantage, and the statistics that are coming out have been illustrating that even more this year, even though that women seem to have also been impacted even more so through COVID as primary caregivers. So there, again, there's this arbitrage dynamic that's coming through where women have an ability to be very resourceful, very detail-oriented, highly attuned to risk, which can be great factors into starting a business, but also play out in the caregiving space. So we're trying to support all of that engagement and trying to support women to access capital as much as possible. We are industry agnostic. So our main filter is there a female founder? Is it a real female founder? In other words, we have had businesses present to us where there's a female co-founder, but she's got 5% equity and the male co-founder's got 95% equity. So that was an interesting one to kind of pick through. And usually you just want to work that through at the beginning of the conversation so that we don't waste people's time. We have a very engaged network of angel investors. So we've got about 90 angel investors from across the country. We were founded in Melbourne, so most of our investors are in Victoria, but we have a number of investors, not only in Sydney, but also in Adelaide, Perth, and we're growing nationally because now that we've gone completely virtual, it's actually been amazing. And Queensland, of course. I mentioned about participating at the seed and early stage. So the other thing that's interesting to note is that the federal government has created a scheme around ESIC companies, early stage investment companies, that help to encourage Australian investors to invest in these types of businesses, which allow for a tax offset. And while that is still working its way through the system, we're very supportive of making sure that our investors are aware of those incentives so that we can make the most of the environment in which we're investing. So if there's not any questions, I might keep going.
We do, Ariane, we do have already 2 questions.
Sure.
If I can jump in. So Alexander asks, while we were, I guess, talking about stats around female-led ventures, do you have any statistics or knowledge around the impact that female-led companies have that go beyond financial returns, so
Yes.
social, environmental?
Yes, I have that on a slide coming up, but it's a great point, Alex. So thank you for the question. Yes, we have seen that these types of businesses are very aligned with community and other aspects of social enterprise, which when they can be effectively commercialized, have a great ability to really lift outcomes. Hopefully I can address some of that in the follow-up slide, but I'm happy to go into more detail once we get to that. But yes, we have some anecdotal evidence. Again, similar to any ESG style investing thematic, it's very hard to quantify. And I've spent quite a bit of time looking at social impact, responsible investing, impact investing, and ESG style initiatives. I have not yet seen a very consistent quantitative framework. I'm a very quantitative person, and that's how I look at investing. But what I have been encouraged by is that the UN Sustainable Development Goals are now emerging as a nice global framework that the entire investment community is starting to work towards. And so whenever we look at an investment opportunity, we often would put it under the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then we can use the same language with other investors in the ecosystem. So I hope that helps also answer your question. And UN SDG number 5 is the Sustainable Development Goal specific towards supporting women, not only in economic initiatives, but also around education. And there's some great statistics under UN SDG number 5, if you want to go and do some offline reading, which illustrate the specific quantitative benefits to the entire world society around bridging equality initiatives for women and men. And a lot of that has to do with the economic lift that women help to generate when there is full participation of women in the workforce, as well as when women are educated from a very early age all the way through to being able to enter the workforce. So I probably haven't done it justice, but there's quite a bit of great content there, and I'm very passionate about it as well. So thank you for your question. Was there another question, Camille?
Yes, there is, but you might touch on this a bit later on, but I'll ask it anyway. So what do you think are critical success factors to obtaining investment for female-led companies?
Sure, and I'll weave that into here. So there's a number of factors, and I touched on things around sales and imposter syndrome. There's things that we're definitely mitigating, but there's also great qualities that women bring. And this is where I get very excited when there's a female co-founder working with a great male co-founder, and you can see those diversity benefits coming through because we know that gender diversity helps to drive out performance. So I'll try and incorporate some of that in the rest of my talk here. I just want to give you a bit more context around our background. So I talked a little bit about how we were founded. In terms of statistics, so we are an angel investor network. What that means is our members are individual investors who invest a minimum of $10,000 each per company. And as a network, we invest a minimum of $250,000 per investment that we do, because below that amount, it can be a challenge if we're leading a deal, if we're co-investing in a deal. And this is another exciting dynamic that's happening, and we're very interested to talk to more investors across the country. We're starting to get deals referred to us. So there's many groups out there who've been meeting female founders, and they'll send it to us and they'll say, we're looking at this company, would Scale like to co-invest? And so now we're co-investing with a lot of other great networks and venture capital companies, or we're referring female founders into venture capital, which is again part of that whole ecosystem that we're looking to drive. So if we co-invest, we'll invest a minimum of 100,000. And through the course of our history, we have now invested over $12 million collectively in 27 startups. They're all on our website. We don't have, as I mentioned, we are industry agnostic, but we typically invest in companies where we feel that we can add value. And I'll get into that in more detail, but it's usually aligned with the background and experience of our investors, including me and our investment team, because we're not just going to invest in something because it sounds popular. We're going to invest in something that we know something about, and we have deep sector experience along with our first filter, whether there's a female founder who actually owns a significant proportion of the business and can clearly be illustrated as a majority shareholder. We have a great track record. We have invested in 5 companies that have exited, including a Queensland story, a great Queensland story called Trademark Vision. So Dr. Sandra Mao was the founder of Trademark Vision, which exited after about 3.5 years. We invested in that business when it was worth $1 million, and it exited for over $30 million after 3.5 years. Her business is an amazing artificial intelligence virtual. It's an artificial intelligence business using image recognition, and it was scanning the internet for logos and brands, and it took the world of patent attorneys. It brought it completely forward into the modern age, avoiding scenarios where people were using lots of resource to do keyword searches. And now with Sandra's technology, which is effectively an analytics business, and it was acquired by Thomson Reuters, which is a global analytics business now, helps to patent attorneys and other folks looking for logos and brands on the internet to do that virtually rather than manually. So that was a very exciting outcome for everyone involved. The great thing about that case study also was that not only did we lead that deal, but one of our investors became the chairman of the company. So we had a situation where there was a female chair, female CEO, and they navigated towards exit. It was a very successful outcome and a great example of a company that we helped to take to market. We've also got a fund that we've been launching in markets, and that allows investors who want to back our thematic to come in and join Scale Investors, but not have to do it on a deal by deal basis. And we know that there's many senior folks who are really passionate about our thematic, but don't necessarily have the time to look at deals on a one-by-one basis. So that's a great opportunity to participate in what we're doing. And we've had some great take up with it, and we've had really strong engagement. So we're very excited about that. We also, as I mentioned, have our education program. So what we learned over the years, particularly in the early years of Scale, was that there's a lot of investors in Australia, and this would be the same globally, to be honest, who have just never invested in early stage businesses, but yet they're hearing about deals through their networks. And we notice that there's a lot of folks out there, you know, they'll hear about a deal from their friend in the bar, and they're like, oh, look at this, and oh, here's $100,000 here, and here's 50K there. And you know, the women were feeling a bit left out, but they also were relatively more risk averse. So we wanted to establish this core program where women and men investors who were becoming part of Scale would feel much more empowered and informed and confident about allocating that capital, because again, our core purpose is to invest in female founded companies. But if people weren't comfortable with how the whole investment process worked, they weren't going to write the check, or they'd be writing a smaller check. So we're very excited about our education program as well, and that's available online through our website. That comes free with membership to Scale, but you can also become part of that course as a standalone basis, as mentioned in my presentation. Here's my email if you do want to get in touch and hear more about what we're doing. This is just another illustration of what we're seeing in markets, and this is particularly powerful when you can see the statistics coming through. I think there's actually a typo there, so I apologize, but this is from PitchBook, and it talks about the number of companies that were funded last year that had entirely female-led founder or female co-founder versus the number of startups that were funded out of venture capital from all-male teams. So that sort of amplifies why we're looking to bridge the investment gap, in addition to all the benefits. There are a number of other financial reasons to back female founders. Companies with female founder perform 63% better than those with all-male teams. The businesses founded by women deliver twice as much per dollar invested than just those founded by men. Despite being less likely to raise follow-on funding, founded firms with women are more likely to exit and have a higher internal rate of return. So this again is talking on that capital management piece. Gender diversity delivered higher returns and a lower risk of failure than all male private equity buyout teams. And this touches on the investors as well. Like if you're working with female founders or male founders and your investors are all male, then that can amplify bias. And also they can potentially miss some great investment opportunities. And those are the ones that we're very excited to pick up, because if they're being underfunded and they outperform, well, that's pretty straightforward for us. And it's a great thing to do. And then the companies with women on their founding teams provide faster routes to exit, and the number of exits for those companies is growing at a faster rate than companies with only male founders. So again, we're finding that women are highly commercial. It does mean that for Australia and for Scale, you know, the number of companies that we actually will invest in becomes more and more narrow, but because we're industry agnostic, we can apply our filter around who the actual owners are in the business. And then from there, we can actually look at the businesses on their own 2 feet and then look at the metrics around whatever industry they're in, where the demographic is, who their customers are. We typically look for companies that have the ability to go global, but who are Australian businesses. Here's some other statistics that you might not be across. There are a number of unexplored market opportunities. So this talks to the second question that I think we had around what we are finding for female-founded startups. There are some underrated founders building companies, solving problems currently overlooked or underestimated. So there's a lot of social enterprises coming through, which I think are not really getting proper attention because people are assuming that they are not for profit. There is no reason why a social enterprise can't be for profit. And we've seen a number of great social enterprises become highly profitable. I don't want to say that there's bias, but we've noticed that there are definitely more women founding these types of businesses than men. And the women can see clearly and clearly articulate the commercial opportunities around their core customers. So as an example, there are a number of companies that are leveraging funding out of NDIS. There's a great company that just came out of startup called Sonar. It's a New Zealand-based company that we've been talking to. They help vision impaired folks get access to audiobooks. At the moment, the whole experience around audiobooks is very old school, clunky. It's a hard CD process. People can only borrow 2 or 3 audiobooks at a time. They have to wait for a mail order to come in the post, and then they have to have the hardware for that CD to be put into the disc player. And we all know that with current technology, audiobooks are much more available, but for a blind or vision impaired person, that whole experience is still very old school. So this is a great company that we've been talking to. They have a clear go-to-market strategy. I think they've already got thousands of revenue, and they've got a clear pathway to market for over $1 million in annual recurring revenue in the next 18 months. So when we met them, for me personally, and I have a daughter with a disability, I looked into it very deeply, and I can clearly see the market opportunity. There is already funding in the vision impaired community. So again, thinking differently about what is a profitable company, can that exist in the disability sector? This is where we're seeing some really nice collaborations coming through. And for what it's worth, that company has a strong co-led female and male team. So that's a great partnership. The other thing that we're seeing is strong, diverse founding teams are better at iterating and exploring. So obviously startups need to keep testing things and be prepared to pivot or iterate and change their business model. Female founders are better at hiring diverse teams from the beginning because, again, they're comfortable with working with diversity. I'm not sure if that's more specific to Australia, but we have noticed that trend coming through as well. And where capital is scarce, returns to capital generally will be greater than the capital is plentiful. So in other words, that arbitrage opportunity I was talking to, less than 3% of global venture capital goes to female founders at present. However, of the female founded companies that have been invested in, the statistics clearly show that they've outperformed relative to the other 97%. Just stop me if there's any questions. Here's some more illustrations from PitchBook. This is a little bit more current. So this year, and we have seen it go backwards slightly in COVID, unfortunately, we can see the proportion of where female founded companies have outperformed. And we can also see the number of deals done. So we have, we've got the number of female companies that have been funded, and then we've also got the trend line around the number of deals done, and that's been on the increase, particularly over the last decade. Unfortunately, in 2020, the evidence is showing that we have gone backwards, so that people have reverted to what they know in a pandemic environment where, and I saw this in the paper a few months ago, people are just much more conservative in this current market environment. They will invest in what they know. And unfortunately, what that means is that management teams have gone back to being more male, and investments that have been funded successfully have gone back into being more male-led teams. Not to say that they don't deserve it, but we have seen the swing back the other way. That said, we do believe there's a strong opportunity, and the trend continues to be positive. This is a bit of an illustration on how we at Scale operate. So we talk about the funnel effect. So of all the startups getting established in Australia, how do we meet them? How do we vet them? How do we get them invested in? And so we look at our funnel from the top. We work with all of the female led groups that we have come across. So that's including SBE, which is Springboard Australia, Heads Over Heels. There's also SheEO. There's a number of female-led networks that have started supporting female entrepreneurs. Lady Brains has a great offering through their podcast program. So there's all these great, I don't want to say organic, but sort of, community level initiatives coming up, because the rest of the market has also recognized the challenge in supporting female entrepreneurs. So we meet some amazing companies through those networks. We also get invited to be judges or speakers or presenters at various events like this one. And people might hear about us through this, and then they'll refer companies that are looking for funding back into Scale. So we're always also out on, hunting deals. And for us, what that looks like is we go to StartMates Demo Day. We go to all the demo days that we can possibly attend. And it's great when there's female founders there. We'll have a particular area of focus around those companies. And then from those companies, we'll start engaging with them. Every month we have office hours at Scale Investors. So we'll invite any female founded or co-founded companies to come and talk to us at our office hours. You can find those office hours on our website under our resources and events section. And anybody who wants to come and hear more about us and get to know us, for us, that's the beginning of how we would consider funding an investment in a startup, is getting to know the founder, hearing their story, and doing that with a group of people who are also in the ecosystem is a great way to go. Then we work with investors and entrepreneurs. So now what's been great is that we're getting some inbound referrals. And we also have entrepreneurs approaching us cold because they've heard about us through their other networks. So that is a really nice signal that what we're doing is having an impact and we're being effective, which is delightful for us. We work really hard to make sure that the founders are feeling respected. We work really hard to make sure that we're not wasting founders' time. We want to create value. We want to make it easier for the market. We want to make all of the friction costs lower than what they currently are for founders, because we know how hard it is to raise capital. And we don't want you spending all your time pitching to investors for investment when you could be focusing on your business. So we work with founders from the beginning, and then obviously beyond that, the attraction point, we then interact. So we engage one-on-one. We then go through an investment process. We invite founders who are running companies where we're quite interested and we feel that there's a good investment opportunity to pitch to our network, and we run events every other month. And from there, we obviously provide ongoing network support. We open up doors, we help facilitate introductions, we provide advisory services. We're available as a trusted advisor if you have a question around your cap table, or anything where you would like a bit of support around how to operate strategically your business from investors who've been doing this for a long time. Here's some other data points around how we assess and invest in early stage companies. So we look at the team. For us, that's really, really important. We look at the traction of the business. So how well has the business performed so far? And these are pretty standard metrics that any venture capital or angel investor would consider. But for us, it's particularly important because of our thematic. The cap table is very important to us. So many female founders, unfortunately, have given away a lot of equity really early. They feel like they don't have enough money in the business to pay people properly, so they start giving shares away. And then by the time we meet them, they might have 10 investors and they've been diluted to below 50% of their own company, and then it becomes almost uninvestable. So we like to work with female founders really early to try and explain why that cap table is so important, how the cap table comes together. And also on the other point, how does valuation work and how does that impact them as a founder? Because we don't want to be overly diluting founders. And again, this is something we've particularly seen with female founders, where there's a great sensitivity about giving up too much of their business, but yet they still seem to be giving up too much of their business. So often many of them have been approached by either investors or brokers who convince them that giving up X% in exchange for Y amount of capital is a good thing. But we're not convinced that many of them have been given the best advice, because they go on to become effectively uninvestable unless they've made lots of money, and then it's a non-issue. But at the early stage, this is so important, and we want to help support and advise founders accordingly. And by the way, we've had male investors in our network flag that that's not unique to female founders. This exists across the ecosystem. It's just, I'm providing anecdotal evidence that a number of female founded companies have potentially not been given the right advice. This is an illustration of some of the other female focused organizations. So as you can tell, there's a ton of energy going into this sector, but everybody's got a different angle. So, we're down here with this investment point, but SheEO provides loans, we provide equity funding. So again, every organization's got its own sort of bent, but we like to think that we operate with all of the organizations, and we're always happy to help collaborate and support and provide insight if and where we can. Here's another illustration. This is at a global level. So there's a number of firms and funds emerging that have the same thematic as scale investors. We are the only one in Australasia. So there's 9 in North America. There are 6 in Europe, and there's only scale in Australasia. So we see that as a massive opportunity for this region. So some of the advantages of working through scale, obviously we have a compelling business case backed by real research. Female-led businesses require less funding yet generate better outcomes. That's what the statistics tell us. Investors benefit from the vision and success of diversity while also closing the gender gap in the process. So it's a win-win. Leveraging the strengths of a network. So we love our network. Our angel investors are phenomenal people who join us for the purpose and the opportunity and the ability to invest in real businesses that they can support. They're very generous with their time, not only their capital, and they're really excited and motivated to help support these businesses generate a return as well. And we have a dedicated investment committee. So we've got professional investors, and because we are sophisticated investors, we've got lots of experience. We significantly underinvest in companies. So we in Australia is what we're talking to. This is a global phenomenon, as I articulated earlier. We touched on the generating more revenue and the profit per dollar. Women-led businesses have higher return on investment, and we also know that the diversity thematic can help from a competitive and innovation perspective. Women are moving away from traditional roles and creating businesses that we haven't seen before ever, and never has that been more true than 2020. Investing in the next generation of great Australian companies that most investors can't access today due to inefficient markets. And again, because angel investing and early stage investing in startups are highly network driven, by engaging through scale, you're going to get the best of the pipeline of what we see. And again, that's where this whole network effect really plays well. This is our current portfolio. So we mentioned we've helped facilitate investments in 27 businesses. More recently, we've done Winely, Hack Hunter, Larynx, Vitable, Aerobe. Aerobe, you might have read about in the AFR, is generating a circular wardrobe. Mass Dynamics is a proteomics business, really going quite well, has just done StartMate as well. Neighborlytics, a Victorian business, helping with urban planning, doing a phenomenal job flagging some of the statistics around where cities and emerging development opportunities in Australia can be really effectively run through the use of technology. And we've done a couple of things which touch on the purpose piece. So Larynx is again a voice-led technology. And Talkie Play is down here. So they're helping teach kids how to talk. And Dr. Annie McCauley, is a very impressive founder. So all of these companies have got really, really impressive female founders, and many of which have also got impressive male co-founders. Here's some other examples of exceptional female founders. Our thematic is all about backing exceptional female founders. We talked about Dr. Sandra Mao. We have all probably heard of Jo Horgan. She's amazing. Mecca Brand is just about to open their flagship Sydney store. Kate Morris, obviously, she's just had her IPO this year. She's an amazing entrepreneur. She's been working diligently for over 20 years to get that business to where it is now, highly successful. Sayan Taid, Envato, and obviously Melanie Perkins. So there's a couple of others, and Monty Body, a few others that many of us would have heard of. Thanks so much. I hope haven't gone over time. Happy to take.
Thank you so much. You did really well, and we've got more than 10 minutes for Q&As, so it's perfect. I do have one question for you. So we've talked about the VC scene and investing in early stage founders, but what do you think of gender lens investing on a broader scale? So for everyone on the call, if we hold investment elsewhere, how do you approach supporting female or women-led businesses?
Yeah, and I've heard quite a bit about gender lens investing, which I think is very exciting. And where gender lens investing becomes particularly powerful are some of the economic arguments. We have not approached this from an academic point of view, which is where I think some of the great insights from gender lens investing come from. We've approached this from a commercial point of view. And obviously with my background in financial services, I've been trained to look for great investment opportunities and obviously been trained to look for arbitrage opportunities. But I think there's a nice overlap there. So we have engaged with a number of stakeholders in the ecosystem, particularly investors looking for impact investments with a gender lens. And we often will cite where that gender lens appears in the investment, whether, and more specifically, it'll be what proportion of the company is owned by the women, what proportion of the company is managed by women, what proportion of the company has female board members, and equally, what proportion of the company, what is the company from a diversity point of view. So we'll try and illustrate as much quantitative data as possible. And ironically, that's the more compelling the data is, the more compelling the investment opportunity becomes. So we see a really great overlap there.
That's wonderful, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Do not hesitate. We have a chance to ask Ariane directly some questions. We've got 10 more minutes. Otherwise, I will just ask my own questions, and I have a few. So I wanted to ask you, so you work with female founders day in, day out, and you've mentioned a few of the mistakes that they usually make. Can you go a little bit further, a little bit deeper into this? What are the common mistakes that female founders make?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and it does cut close to home because I've made these mistakes as well. So I'm very sensitive. So, you know, one of the easy ones is apologizing. And you can notice it straight away when a female entrepreneur comes in, whether it's just coming into our office hours or even at the final stage of our due diligence process where they're pitching to investors and they come across as too hesitant, apologetic, not confident, and or not compelling and strong. And that doesn't mean that their company is not compelling or viable. It just means that the entrepreneur is a bit nervous and or hasn't had an opportunity to present that much. So, you know, we're always reviewing whether a pitch is the right way to get to know a business. That's how most entrepreneurs have been trained to sell their businesses, but I don't think it plays into women's strengths that well. So that's why we take a long time to get to know female founders offline before we might put them into a scenario where they have to present to, say, 50 plus investors who are ready to write checks. We also coach them highly. So before any engagement, and the good news here is that many female founders are becoming more and more strong and powerful and compelling and confident when they do pitch. So there's definitely that aspect. There's also the imposter syndrome. So that sort of talks about, you know, that touches on the apologizing piece. So you can tell when a woman doesn't have conviction, even if she does have conviction, if you know what I mean. So we've had some amazing entrepreneurs that we've seen talk about their businesses and get really passionate and very, very knowledgeable and quite technical about their businesses, what they're looking to achieve for consumers. But in a different context, they lose their confidence. And again, we're trying to manage for that. So imposter syndrome, selling, pitching skills, and even, unfortunately, and I'm sure that there's male founders in the same category, not knowing their numbers. And that can quickly undermine any kind of dynamic and dialogue between investors and founders, where if a founder doesn't have their numbers nailed, and if they're not really clear on their business strategy or where they're going to grow or where the revenue is coming from, who their core customer is, that's my point around traction. they need to be able to really nail their quantitative metrics, because that's where you're going to really get investors quite engaged. So those are some examples. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that was comprehensive. Thank you. Know your numbers, be confident, and perhaps find other ways than a pitch if you're not comfortable to build some relationship with investors. Yeah. All great tips. Thank you. I'd love to broaden the scope of our discussion today. So you've mentioned that investing in women is, I guess, an opportunity that some investors have overlooked. What do you think of the opportunity to invest in, I guess, more diverse companies? But by diverse, I mean perhaps with an LGBT background, or perhaps with founders with a disability.
So what was the first part of your question?
So we've touched on the fact that women-led ventures might be a missed opportunity for investors.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So
what do you think of the opportunity to invest in a more diverse manner, but on a broader scope, like LGBT, disability, First Nation people?
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. It's huge. And we're seeing that again globally. My sense is Australia is behind as well. We just have a very, interesting demographic. And, when I moved to Melbourne, I first came to Melbourne in 1997, and I was struck by, and I was living in Hong Kong at the time. So I was really struck by the very white demographic of Australia, and the fact that in the working world in financial services was very white male, versus the companies and the demographics I experienced overseas. So there's that, and then even below that, it's the other groups. So the LGBTQ, the people with disability. I feel like we have a long way to go, and every society has got its own particular biases and its own particular prejudices. Australia is getting better, and I think we aim to be a very egalitarian society. We are very rules-based, but at the end of the day, when you scratch below the surface, we've only had about 2 generations of real diversity, much less accepting of people who have different profiles or may have a disability. So I'm very passionate about this. I think that beyond the female thematic, there's an even stronger business case to support people from different socioeconomic groups and different demographics. And we work quite closely with a number of angel and incubator groups that are also focused on other aspects of diversity. So I'm very excited to explore those opportunities. That said, investors are looking for commercial returns. So we need to help all of these founders and all of these entrepreneurs understand what looks like a strong commercial return, and really support their areas of focus, because there are huge number of customers. And my example of Sonar earlier, the vision impaired community does need and deserve audiobooks. They don't need to be ordering a hard disk to listen to a book and wait for 10 days to get one book. That's just not something that I would endorse in 2020. So yeah, the commercial applications and opportunities are huge. And I think we just have to be mindful that that we are working within market dynamics, and that there is an economic aspect to this, but looking beyond what and I speak to this very passionately personally, because I've worked and lived in so many different countries. I am not the expert on what every single female founder is doing. I'm actually quite interested to hear what founders are doing, and I want to hear about what problems they've identified and what they're looking to solve and how they're going to solve it. And if it's a commercial opportunity, I totally want to be invested in that business. And it takes time to work through and listen to people. So give people a moment and try and park biases at the door, and that's something that I think everybody can align with.
Thank you, Ariane. I think that's a great comment. Starting with being conscious of our own bias is so important. We all have some, whether we want it or not. So that's a great place to start. We have time for one more question. Anna in the audience asked, what is the minimum investment to join your network?
Thanks, Anna. Great question. So we take checks from a minimum of $10,000. We are a membership-based network, so we operate with an annual membership. You can join Scale as what we call an affiliate member. If you just want to become part of the network, experience what we do, get access to the education, join the events, you can do that for a lower annual fee than if you decide to become a full investor. We also have family memberships. So we've got some great people in the network who come on date night. So you'll have the husband and wife team and the sort of debating which companies they like and why they like them. And it's really lovely to see them enjoying it so much. We have events all the way through the year. So not only do we have the pitching events, but we also have the educational events. We have networking events, so we're building lots of engagement. We went completely virtual in March, and we're going to stay virtual because that helps us to activate people who previously would have had to travel to attend our events in person. And we've had such great feedback on that for not only the investors, but obviously the founders as well. They don't have to commute and spend money trying to meet Sydney investors if they're in Perth, for example. So all of that plays into this wonderful, highly engaged network of individuals who are really passionate. They see the purpose, they see the commercial opportunity, and they want to invest with other sophisticated investors who have had lots of experience. So we welcome anyone who wants to engage further. And I personally get to know all of our investors, so I'd love to get to meet anyone interested.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Ariane. One last bonus question, and just a few seconds to answer this one. 2020 has been a really tough year for everyone. What is your wish for next year?
I wish that we would have more economic participation by women. I wish that in this period of massive disruption, that society continues to leverage all of this great technology that we have available that previously companies and organizations were not embracing due to old stereotypes and old ways of working. So I wish that through this, we can get more economic participation and everybody can benefit.
That's wonderful. I love this wish, and 2021 is going to be brilliant. I can feel it. Thank you so much, Ariane. Just a few closing thoughts before we wrap up. Dear members, I hope this webinar gave you practical knowledge and insights into impact investing and how powerful it can be to foster diversity. I really enjoyed our discussion today on how to support women by someone who lives and breathes it. So thank you so much, Ariane. We have very exciting events coming up soon, including Impact Investing for Inclusion and Affordable Housing with Rebecca Thomas, Executive Director, Impact Investing at Social Ventures Australia. So join us. And after that, in February, we'll have another one on investing in agtech and food tech with a specialist fund that will join us from the US. So please make sure you check this coming event on our meetup page. Just a final thank you. We have recently hit 500 members, and I am so delighted by this milestone. It's truly fantastic, but I would love your help to grow even further. So if you enjoyed today's discussion, please invite your friends and colleagues who might also find these conversations useful, and make sure you follow us on social media. I'd love to thank you all for coming today and making the time and commitment to learn and be curious. By learning and choosing to support impact investing and sustainable finance, we can truly create positive impact at scale. Pardon the pun. So if you want to connect with Ariane, she has shared her details, but I will send everyone an email with the recording and her contact details. So that's it for now. Have a wonderful day and see you all next time.